Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
Well, it's a beautiful morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning on Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. My name is Emmanuel Ojadigele. Of course, you know what we do for you here on the show. We bring it to you as it is when it drops from where it drops. We'll tell you what's happening around you and help you make light of them, make perspective, proper perspective of these issues and help you understand them better and help you make informed decisions. We also have 3 segments on the show. We'll bring you the newspaper analysis segment. We'll also bring you the interview segment where we speak to our analysts, our guests who help us to give light to some issues and of course give us insight, in-depth analysis and some proper perspective to those issues. And of course later on in the show you join me on Spring Trends where I bring you who's trending, what is trending and why they are trending and what people are saying about the who, the what and the why. It's February 13th, Monday, 1 day to Valentine's, 12 days to the general election, and of course, a lot of things have been happening in the country. A lot of things have been going wrong and right at the same time. We just pray that you have a very, very good one and that, like Femi will always say, you have springs in your steps and that the day turns out very well for you. Don't forget that we're reaching you live from StarTimes at channel 190 on the DTT platform. You can follow us on all our social media handles on Facebook and Instagram at Western Spring Television and on Twitter at WSTV_NG. You can also check us out on YouTube and subscribe to our channel so you can catch up with episodes of your favorite programs and of course be immersed in all of our quality. My name is Emmanuel Ojadigele once again. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for joining us this beautiful morning. I am Temitope Ajijololuwa Ola.
Well, a lot of things are still happening in the country, people still having to queue for fuel. I saw a very long queue last night. I went out for the first time in like 2 years.
Well, I beg to differ to that. Well,
okay.
There's still queue.
There's still queues, yes.
It just eased down.
Yeah, at the NNPC station at Lameco area, there were queues on both sides, They even had difficulties going in and coming out. I think that they were trying to ration via fuel what they had. Yeah. And the ATMs, the queues have also not disappeared.
Yes, the ATMs are still very much there. The queues there are still long. I still saw some this morning.
Well, then there's no cash at all in town. That's what it is. That's just the only way to put it. There's no money in circulation. There's no need beating around the bush or lying to ourselves. Some persons have had to borrow money, and I wonder why the POS operators have. Some of them have cash, and banks are saying they don't have cash. There are some conspiracies that the POS operators buy the cash, and that's why they are charging exorbitant fares and giving exorbitant charges. But then we hope that all of this crisis is they're resolved very soon, and that life returns to normal for us as we head into the election. Well, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll begin with the papers. Something interesting happening on the faces of the Nigerian papers this morning. But we'll try to make up for that. But let's just come back from this break. I'll bring you the newspaper analysis. All right, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the show. It's still Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. And we'll begin with the Punch newspaper this morning. Well, you can see there for yourself. There isn't much on the Punch newspaper this morning, just some campaign pictures. But apart from that, we also have some stories there. Can probes allege obese 2 billion naira largesse. PCC claims blackmail. As on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. It was really a tumultuous one yesterday for Nigerians, and I almost fell prey to that story because I saw this stamp, the can stamp, and I thought, oh, there's no way anybody could forge can stamp, But it turned out that it was just the handiwork of some rabble-rousers.
Yes. Yes, I read the story as well, and if you are saying that the person who wrote this petition, what's the name now? The PDP, I think. Yes. they said a particular man, a pastor in fact, wrote this, petition. And the man came and said he doesn't even know about this petition.
Yes.
He hasn't even met Obi in person. I mean, he sees him on the screen just like, several other people out there, So if you, that alone in itself has countered what it is that you were trying to do with that in the first place. Because if a person that was alleged to have written a petition is not
Comes
even
out to debunk
yeah,
it.
exactly, that's wrong, and we need to stop politics of this nature. I mean, this is where we see people being hunted by gunmen, being ambushed by a lot of people. I mean, several things happening to candidates across board anyway. So we need to stop things like that. We need to stop all this propaganda, all this blackmail, all of this. It needs to stop.
Especially when it involves dragging a body like Khan. That man, the Francis Onwumere, came out. He even made a video, to say that, look, whatever you're trying to do with my name, I don't. I mean, all the things on the letter was fake. The address of the church was fake. The phone numbers were fake, and it means that people are deliberately trying, because Obi's mantra has been, we know they give shishi, and then it would have been really scandalous for someone like that to now be the one giving 2 billion naira, and so I was also concerned, like I said earlier, about the authenticity of the stamp. If you can forge a stamp of a body like Khan,
then
I think politicians and their ilk are actually very, very desperate. Yeah. And
I remember my first reaction when I read the story was, a pastor?
Yes.
A pastor wrote that. And if I just stopped there, it would have been a very difficult situation. It would have been a bad thing. I mean, I would have gone on to propagate such false news. But I read further, and the man debunks that. That's really a longer. I mean, you had to use a pastor, against its own body.
Its body, yes.
So it's a bad one, really.
Well,
bad.
God help us in this country. We'll move on from that story to Naira crisis, governors fear recession, 4 more states join legal battle. Niger State was the first of those 4 states on Saturday, Friday, to join the legal battle against the federal government. We hope to see where that terminates. It's just been some back and forth between the government, the governors, and the federal government.
Yes, really. I mean, we've also had, some governors threatening a lot of petitions, a lot of actions, against the federal government if something is not done about all of this crisis in the country, and especially with the cash crunch. If they are now fearing recession again, there is, really a problem.
Yes,
it's really a problem.
It's a very big problem.
We need the federal government needs to, do something fast right now, especially as it is, just a bit over a week now to the elections. It's really important.
Yeah, I was on the streets on Friday, and the frustration is you can feel it, you can touch it. People are angry, and if it's not properly managed, it could spiral out of control.
Yes. Although I still hold the opinion that, in this country, we always cry for change. We always do, for positive change, that is. But then we're not ready to go through, to pay the price or to make the sacrifice. I still hold the opinion that if we've been, I know that the CBN has its faults. I know that the federal government may have their fault. We also have faults. I mean, let me take you through. Okay, this the Naira policy, we've been aware of it since November. I mean, we were supposed to have done a lot. My husband was in Abeokuta in January, and he was saying they were still spending the old note as if nothing was going to happen.
Yes.
And I'm sure that was what informed, all of the crisis they had in Ogun State towards the deadline and all of that. They had proposed in their hearts that they must shift base. They were not going to shift base as people, but the government and the CBN must shift base for them. Because that's what has been happening. We always like for the government to revert on whatever deadline has been placed. So we just are like that. And I want to tell us that sometimes if we are crying for change, we need to pay the price. We need to
Yes.
make the sacrifice.
We need to make the sacrifices.
Because I would always go back to that word, no pain, no gain. You really can't do that. So we need to move from our comfort zone. You can't stay in your comfort zone and expect change. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So if we've been able to suffer this long, and I don't think this deadline was called for in the first place, because it's really not even making any difference.
Yes, I think the problem here is that the CBN's policy was not well thought out.
That's their fault.
You know, because if you're giving, you can't give people 120 days or 90 days to return all the old cash, the old notes they have with them,
Yes.
without making, as at December 15th, when
Yes.
the new notes were released and people were asked to start bringing in their old notes, there were no new notes in circulation. So there was no way people with old notes would have returned their own notes. And we heard what the CBN governor was misquoted to have said on Friday, that the NSPMC doesn't have the capacity to print,
yes.
you know, and then they came out to debunk it and said it was misquoted. You know, so you don't have enough of the new notes, but you want people to return the old notes. And now the Council of State has directed that you either print more new notes or recirculate the old notes. It will be counterproductive to recirculate old notes.
Yes.
That means pending the time, they would print more new notes.
They should put back the old notes in circulation. You said that's another problem. Now the point is, Nigerians should have, just the way we are doing now, we should have had queues at the banks at that time.
Well, the
There
banks,
should have been protests
the
at
banks
that
did not
time.
even have the cash.
Yes, they would have known that there was problem. So it's either you give us new notes or you cancel whatever deadline you said you would have. So, but if we are not pushed to the wall, I
Yes.
still have that saying about people, the Nigerians. If we're not pushed to the wall, if we don't see something imminent staring us in the face, we don't act.
But the government has
We
pushed
don't.
people to the wall. Like, before we move on from that story, I think that the blame can go around, you know, of the people to the government, the government to the CBN. But I also think that, for instance, like I've always said on the show, there are nomads who, as of this moment, don't even know anything about the cash redesign policy. In other countries, at least we've read about it. I'm very much aware of the United Kingdom trying to change the face of the coins, you know, the pence and some of their notes. That will run from 2022 to about 2024.
I understand that. But I can also tell you that that Nigerian situation is dynamic.
It shouldn't be.
It's dynamic. I want to tell you that we have the case. I still maintain that the CBN is a Nigerian body. The CBN governor is a Nigerian. Put aside whatever other sentiments you might have or whatever other opinions you might have as to why this is being done at this period. But I still want to hold the fact that in those functional claims now that we would say, the issue of this vote buying, vote selling and all that is not as strong. I'm not going to say it's not there, because I won't say that it's not there. But it's not like we have in Nigeria. And I'm going to tell that it's going to stare us all in the face that this thing is going to have this same issue, the same recurring thing that we've been having back and forth.
So let me ask you, do you honestly think that the redesign of the cash policy will curb vote buying?
It would have, in a way.
Because
not eradicated, but it would have curbed it.
We covered the governorship election, and I can tell you confidently that people buy votes via transfers now.
Exactly.
So you don't even need.
So if you're going to do that via transfer,
if you're redesigning the cash, the notes, there should be a side-by-side phasing out policy. It should go from the same way the polymer came into existence, and there was no deadline.
Exactly, there was no deadline.
The paper notes, 20 naira, 10 naira, and 15 naira thereabout, were phased out in no time because people were willing to exchange. But now there are issues surrounding. There's the issue of the quality of the notes. There's the issue of availability of the notes.
The quality, we've had analysts say that it was necessary.
What is our problem with the CB? I think we need to bring Murphy Baby on the show to come talk to us. Well, that's that on the Punch newspaper. Very scanty paper this morning.
Yes, very. All right, we're moving on quickly now to The Nation. The Nation is quite as scanty as the Punch as well. Tinubu lists ways out of Naira crisis. Governor's CBN Act now. Well, Tinubu has listed ways out of Naira crisis. I think he's trying to prefer solution. So the CBN governor needs to go and learn from Tinubu.
I never knew Tinubu was a financial expert or a policy expert.
Or maybe he has them, in his payroll. So
yes, and they've given him
advice, and now he's dishing it out hot. Well,
I really don't know what is in all fairness now. I don't know what Emefiele's problem is. I don't know what is wrong, but the man seems to be willingly and willfully blind and deaf to what's going on.
People, yes.
I mean, I said it jokingly on this show on Friday that despite the ruling of the Supreme Court, there was a countdown on CBN's website.
Yes, there was.
That shows you that the man does not even, it doesn't even, but then you can't blame.
Brought it down.
Yes, but you can't blame him because the ruling of the Supreme Court was granted based on a suit between the federal government and the state government. And that's where the state government missed it. They didn't join CBN as a party. So the rule was not binding on, the ruling was not binding on the CBN. But then Murphy should have at least, I mean, that was a slap in the face. I thought it was insensitive. At least there was a ruling, there was a Council of State meeting that same day, and you still put up a deadline. It really wasn't nice. It
shouldn't come out as a surprise now that one would say categorically that the CBN or Governor Emefiele now is insensitive. I would say he has been insensitive.
Yes,
from
of
the
course,
very
since he left the country while the entire country was in shambles.
And I would even go back to the beginning of this policy. I didn't see any empathy towards this thing. Like they do in other countries now.
You want to massage people's egos.
Exactly. Speak to their conscience. Oh, the dear people of Nigeria, we will be doing this, we will be doing that. These are the difficulties you will face in the days ahead. Please bear with us. We're going to put this in place. We're going to put that in place to help you, to see you through this period. Please bear with us. We are sorry. We don't do that in Nigeria. Nobody does that.
Has the president even spoken on
That's what I'm going to get to the president too. So the president didn't even come out to do that. So let's say the CBN would not do that. There's a military aspect to it. But the president, he should have done that.
Well, like we've always said, Boo-Boo is just
from the start, such has never been happening.
And the man came out now, Murphy, at the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, and he said, well, apologies to whoever is hurt, whoever is paying, but we're not going to shift ground, just do. I mean, he felt like he was trying to get back at Nigerians for stopping his presidential ambition,
Or for some other reasons.
Yes, or for some other reasons. But it just speaks to the fact that our leaders aren't in touch with people.
Yeah,
I mean, and it's funny that we are quick to respond to foreign issues when there's a problem in Chad, in Niger Republic, anywhere. You see presidents, giving condolences. That's Buhari now going out to visit them. But here we are in the midst of a cash crunch, and it's nowhere to be found.
Well, it's more like a show-off to me anyway.
Yeah, so let's move on to the last paper that we have for you today. Daily Trust newspaper says, cash crunch. Rural dwellers resort to trade by barter. Can't access new old notes after taking cash to banks. Borno Yobe villagers turn to Niger's currency.
This is the real problem I see in this story. The fact that Borno and Yobe villagers are turning to another nation's currency. It's really saddening, and
very much saddening.
It does not look like it's going to augur well for the economy.
Yes. Well, resorting to trade by barter just sets us back hundreds or tens of years. I have yam, do you have rice? I need rice, do you have beans? Very bad times we are in. Now, CBN's Naira policy is money confiscation. That's coming from the Nigeria Governors Forum, the NGF there.
The fact that neither the new notes nor the old notes are in circulation.
Yes. Now, at the bottom strip of the Daily Trust, Turkish embassy, Murik seek help for earthquake victims. Bandit kill DPO, 4 policemen in Niger. Man dies in scuffle with school bus driver who defiled a 7-year-old daughter, as on page 32. Below the nameplate, 13 days to go. We will work with women across state for Tinubu's victory. Badaru, Obedient launch structured media and app for election monitoring. Taraba PDP governorship candidate, I'll use military experience to address security challenges. And the last three stories there. Nigeria records 13% growth as airlines airlift 16 million passengers. How influencers, politicians mislead Nigerians ahead of elections as part of the story of the Khan issue yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, Atiku asks DSS to interrogate Fani Kayode over coup allegation. Well, that was a very strong and unnecessary statement from Fani Kayode, saying that Atiku met with some generals and they're plotting to disrupt the election. And the military had to come out to debunk that. Atiku himself has come out. I mean, we shouldn't overheat the politics. It's part of what we'll be saying, we'll be talking about on the show this morning when we're bringing our guest to look at the polity and some of the things that have been happening. Of course, the campaigns, they've shifted from issue-based campaign to campaigns of calumny, and you begin to wonder what's happening in the country. Well, after this break, you get to meet our guest, and we'll begin our discussion on the state of the nation. Do stay with us.
Stay with us.
All right, welcome back to the show. It's still Morning Spring on Western Spring Television, and we're looking at issues of the state, or you could call it state of the nation. We're looking at things happening in the country and why they are happening and what we need to know about these issues. And to help us discuss those issues this morning, we have an elder statesman, if you like to call him that, on the show. He's a former chairman, editorial board of the Daily Independent newspaper. He's also a policy analyst, Mr. Kami Ademilui. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
It's good to have you again.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start. What do you make of Nigeria at the moment? What are your thoughts about the state of the nation at the moment?
Well, as one of the many long-suffering citizens of Nigeria, the country is in a big mess, actually. I mean, right now you have to count your pennies, and that's not figuratively anymore because, I mean, I have a problem spending money now because you don't know how to access money. I mean, so most basic of commodities, you can't even access it in this country anymore. There are politicians who are making all kinds of inflammatory statements, and much of which has nothing to do with the country in very deep structural crisis. It's not just this issue of not getting fuel, not getting money. It's also the question of that nobody is realizing the fact that the country is heading into a recession. The country's debt servicing is a crisis, actually, no matter how you spend. And, you know, whoever's going to take over on the 29th of May, which is just round the corner, is going to be given a poison chalice. I mean, because it's going to be the most difficult job anybody has taken on since 1960, and people are pretending it's okay. There's nothing okay about the way this country is at the moment. I mean, even during the Civil War, I was in secondary school, boarding school during the Civil War, and nobody actually knew in Lagos when I was in school that there was a Civil War going on. You know, the bars were open in Obalende, and you know, life was normal. And there was a currency change which nobody knew anything about. And we now have a situation with modern technology, with everything. There's currency change, the place is in crisis. The economy is being decapitalized and depressed because right now, how much sales are people making unless they have access to electronic transfers? I mean, if you look at the people selling commodities like onions, tomatoes, they're just selling at any price now to keep body and soul together and keep things going because the cash flow for people to make even ridiculous purchases like 200. I mean, you can imagine somebody of my age, I have to count pennies if I want to make a purchase of 200. The only place I feel safe making purchases now is somewhere where you can use cash transfer. And when you look at it, I mean, like Bismarck Rimani was very good. He was on a rival station of yours the other day. I won't mention it. He made a very good point, which all these people are not, that the economy is actually contracting by about much as 7%. If you look at the first quarter of this year, it would have contracted by 7%. In my own guess estimate, it might be up to 9%. Because an economy contracts when purchasing power is depressed. In this case, purchasing power was already depressed anyway. I mean, what's the 30,000 naira minimum wage is. I mean, it doesn't make sense when you look at it per day, you know what I mean. But now you now have a situation in which purchasing power is actually depressed because people don't even have access to their own cash. And how can you go to a bank and they say you can't get more than 2,000 or 5,000? Now, like I was saying to, I think it was Olanipe the other day, by the time you withdraw 2,000 naira from a bank, how much did it cost you to get to the bank? Then how much is it going to get cost you to get back? So you've probably blown about 500-600 naira out of that. The whole thing is ridiculous, actually. I've never seen it this bad before because it defies logic, defies common sense, and I don't really know why it's happening.
Yes, it's still the same question. Before we get down into the nitty-gritty, still the same question for the election. In the build-up to the election, have we ever had it this dicey, this strange, where you have different things happening at the same time in the socio-political space?
No, it's you use the right word. It's a very dicey proposition right now. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the last competitive presidential election we had in Nigeria was in 1979 when you had 5 parties and it was competitive, you know. We've been used to this duopoly of, I wouldn't say Tweedledee and Tweedledum, but we've had this duopoly of PDP versus ACN or PDP versus APC. But this is a really competitive election, and there are geopolitical and religious factors involved, you know. And unfortunately, it's really more based on whose turn it is to eat than on the real issues. Because a presidential election now, we're on the eve of a presidential election. This election should be the most decisive, game-changing election since independence, because the country's structural disequilibrium is so pronounced that I don't understand how the whole thing has degenerated. I mean, you had the spokesman of one political party, for what I was reading on your, or hearing on your news review, what the papers say, saying that another presidential candidate was having meetings with army personnel. And this is a very dangerous and irresponsible kind of thing to say, because you are accusing somebody of treason, which if it is true, he should have been arrested straight away. This is the level, the very low level that we have degenerated, because right now we ought to really be talking about the very serious structural crisis. This country is in a debt crisis. You can spin it as much as you like. You have a question, you have a situation in which absurdly we do not find the political will to tackle the issue of multiple exchange rates, which is destructive. It's moved the country away from any form of production into consumption, because why produce or run anything? Why run a television station when I can give you $5,000 every Monday at the official rate? You change that $5,000 on the black market rate within 15, 18 minutes maximum. So why do you want to run anything? Whether it's a car wash, a radio station, you get what I mean. You have so many things, the non-implementation of the Oronsai report on the costs of the machinery of the government. Look, the Nigerian state at the moment, unless you are living in this fairy tale existence these people are living in, is in dire straits. The country is technically insolvent. And it could, by about October, Independence Day, be bankrupt and seeking an IMF bailout. These are very instructive. A lot of the things that you hear on television and on radio are ephemeral things, rather childlike, toys and froings. I mean, what happened on Saturday, for example, in Lagos, is a forewarning which people are not picking up. Because if you cannot have a rally in the heart of Lagos at Tafawa Balewa Square on a Saturday, have you worked out what's going to happen when the election results come out? Because people have so psyched themselves up in this country now, they are not sure whether going to court or not going to court, and the courts themselves have become a problem, that they're going to accept these election results. I think, I mean, everybody has to be careful now. I mean, my son, one of my sons actually, was telling me that the scene, because he had to go to work, unfortunately, on Saturday. And luckily, they were looking at the carnage from the top floor of a building near that area. And he said, look, that in what they saw, I mean, people were just trying to get to the venue of a rally, and they were being attacked, you know, in broad daylight. And you have the military, the policing system there. They must have had, I mean, you must have rudimentary intelligence that some people would try to prevent a rally going on. It forbids something very terrible, because I don't know what's going to happen. The election is on the 25th, that's a Saturday. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen by Monday, because it's obvious that the whole thing is psyched up for a cataclysm if the intelligence forces are not proactive. And if you cannot be proactive when people are holding a rally, how proactive are you going to be when election results come out? I mean, by now, you should have looked at flashpoints. You should have had scenario planning of what's going to happen the day after the election, as the results come in, 2 days after the election, that kind of thing. And it makes me wonder, because if the central bank of the country cannot do scenario planning and project management to change currency, then what are we expecting after what is already a very divisive election and what will definitely be contentious election results? Well, a real mess. Sorry to depress you.
Let's get back to the cash crunch now. This Naira redesign policy, do you think it has any merits at all for the economy? Or had it been implemented differently, would it have had?
Actually, the currency, because I used to be in printing actually, for a long time. My father was a printer. I still have interest in his printing press by inheritance, you know. And printing has become one of the most difficult businesses to be involved in, because the change of technology, you have to keep reinvesting and reinvesting and investing. You know, if you make 100 Naira, you have to set aside 40 Naira because the technology is changing. So basically, in a country, you should have a redesign, a change of currency every, in my opinion, every 6 or 7 years, because counterfeiting is a problem. You can derail your entire monetary policy, make your currency worthless, troublesome. So I think statutorily, you should really change your currency every 6 years. But there are sensible ways of doing things which we seem to lack in this country. You have to plan to change. And first of all, as has been said in common sense, you don't force out a currency. You phase out a currency. You have a situation in which, as people are lodging in their money, they're getting new notes. That money never comes back. The old notes never come back. It looks pretty straightforward. I think somebody in primary school should be able to work that one out, you know. But they didn't do that. Now, up to today, first of all, there are issues. We don't know how much this new process has cost. Nobody has given us the figures. Then secondly, how much money did you actually print? You had a clear idea of how much money was in circulation, how much you needed to change, and the time frame. You know the amount of branches of banks in Nigeria. Now, did you give orders for the printing? First of all, what is the capacity, what's the local capacity of our local printing process, our local mint? If the mint can only produce this amount of currency within this amount of time, and this is an import-dependent economy, so I suppose most of the materials will be imported. We don't have a paper industry, for example, ink, plates, you know, they all work. So how much have you farmed out, outsourced for people like De La Rue, the major currency printers abroad? How much did you outsource to them to print? You get what I mean? So it looks to me as if this whole process is amateurish. But what you have right now is a crisis of confidence in the currency of a country, which is a very dangerous thing. For example, I'm not even sure whether people are still accepting the old notes. You get what I mean? I mean, my wife said that in Lagos it varies from place to place. Whether you can go somewhere, the person will abuse you that she doesn't. There was like I was saying to Oladipo, I think it was Oladipo, or Tunde Daudu. I keep getting them mixed up. I'm getting old, you know. I was saying to one of them that, you know, one of my sons said, you know, around the corner from where we live in Yaba, they live in Yaba, my family lives in Yaba. On Friday night, a few days ago, there was a fisticuff in a bar, you know, the beer parlor round corner from the house, you know. These guys, they spent a lot of money on drinks and pepper soup, you know. think they ran up a bill of about 7,000, and so the woman said that she doesn't accept old notes, and the transfer wasn't going, and they ended up in a brawl. And this is the situation where people who don't think put the country, because it's now varying from place to place where the old notes are actually a medium of exchange. This has depressed the economy, because, I mean, how do you buy akara or puff or anything when the person is not going to accept old notes? Then how do you get the new notes? This is amateurish, and, you know, people in this country, you know, one of the things is we're not taking anything seriously. I mean, if you don't take currency seriously, then what else are you taking seriously? Because a lot of the fault lies in the fact that the method of recruitment and selection in this country is flawed. I mean, if you look at somebody like, to give you an example of where her start, you just confirm anybody in this country. Either you're asking them to take a bow and go, or you confirm them without any serious diligence. And you give them strategic offices of state without any diligence. You just confirm people, whether it's as Chief Justice, Governor Central Bank, Director General. These are very important. I mean, the best example I always give is John Maynard Keynes. You know, I mean, Keynes will always be one of the outstanding economists of all times, even in 500 years' time. Keynes came from the minor aristocracy. He was a relation of the royal family. He went to all the right schools. He was a wrangler at Cambridge. A wrangler is a super first. A first is a 70%. A wrangler is 85% and above. In spite of this, somebody who came from the aristocracy, who got a super first at Cambridge, he didn't get into the Bank of England. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the cousin of the Oni of Ife, or the Sultan of Sokoto, or the Obi of Nigeria getting 85% at the best university in Nigeria and not being able to enter the central bank? That tells you a lot, does it not? When they confirmed the governor of the central bank, the chief, how long do they take? They don't ask him serious questions. They don't ask him. I mean, I've seen confirmation hearings abroad. I've seen confirmation hearings on CNN. Somebody wants to be confirmed as a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. It might be a bit unfair, right? But the senators interviewing the person refer to articles he wrote in a student magazine in secondary school. Frankly, I thought that was unfair. I mean, how can you debar somebody from a job? Somebody who wrote an article in St. Charles Grammar School student magazine at the age of 15 or 16. You shouldn't hold that against him when he wanted to. But doesn't that show you diligence? That look, the governorship of the central bank is probably the most serious post in the country, because, like Keynes himself said, he who controls the currency controls the country. The person who controls the currency controls the country. The Chief Justice will not be able to get to work if he doesn't have fuel in his car to get to work. It's an important post too. It's a very strategic post, a very important post. But the governor of the central bank is as strategic as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, because he's the commander-in-chief of the currency. And if you control the currency, you control the country much more than the president. And you now have a situation in which, in my opinion, I mean, you cannot compare the person who is governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria today with the kind of materials, the kind of personnel we've had in the past, like Ola Vincent, like Asabia, like Clementi Song. And it shows a decline in standards. It's not just this currency issue that you're talking about. The decline of standards has gotten to the point where Nigeria has scored a terrific first in a negative way, in which the Supreme Court issues a statement threatening people attacking it. I've never seen it anywhere in the world, maybe if you use your search engine, that the Supreme Court makes a statement like that. The Supreme Court is supposed to be attacked. Legal scholars will attack decisions. Lawyers will attack. Laymen who don't know anything about anything, they will attack decisions. That's what, I mean, look at the amount of attacks on the Supreme Court of the United States of America since the revision of Roe versus Wade on abortion.
Yeah.
It's been an attack on the Supreme Court, on even individual judges on a daily basis. So what you're saying in this country about this currency crisis is the decline in standards. Because you cannot do anything. I mean, when I got to your station, I had to go through a protocol and somebody put up my, that kind of thing. But it's sure that you had planned what you are doing now. You didn't just ask me to come, and I came. You selected people as to their suitability, and you were prepared. Yeah, I can see you are prepared, better prepared than I am actually. But the thing is, you did a currency this thing. You didn't have any scenario planning. You didn't do any project management. I mean, when this beautiful building, when it was being constructed, I used to come here, and see, workplace. But you must have had a project manager now. You must have had project management. You can't just say, okay, well, abacadabra, we're going to build a new studio overnight. No, you must have had project managers who worked out how much cement, iron rod, this one, that one, how long it would take, contingency planning, the whole gamut of work, These people went ahead. You've dislocated the economy. I mean, you have to be careful what you say on the air. But the fact is that this economy is already dislocated. It's a problem to even move from place to place because somebody wants to go from here to Ife or go from here to Ibadan. He's not even sure whether they're going to accept the old currency. It's not. And I was surprised when I talked to a friend, stayed with me overnight, came from Lagos, and the car from Lagos, a guy got to the car park at 6:10 because he just had to get to Lagos. I mean, he just had to get to Shogbo for Oka. He had very important thing to do. He didn't take the train. He said he wanted a straight. Now, he got at 6:10 in the morning. And the thing didn't take off from Ojota till about 10:25. That's 4 hours, right? My math is bad, so you have to bear with me. Now, the reason why the Sienna didn't load up for 4 hours is because the people who came, they didn't have cash. So it was not a problem to transfer to the garage. So this one would try about 3 times, the transfer was not going. And so it took 4 hours to load the Sienna. The fact of the matter is that in a serious country, a lot of people would have resigned at the central bank, control of currencies, because this thing, you have demarketed the country. You presented yourself, and you see, this thing is not just about myself and yourself not having currency. The perception you give, because somebody is going to be rating your bonds in Nigeria. You can't just borrow money without somebody doing a credit risk and say, this guy looks a bit dodgy. I mean, a serious credit risk agency is not going to give all 3 of us the same mark. I mean, even in an exam, all 3 of us can't get the same mark. So now you're even talking about the pricing of insurance to Nigeria. If you're going to bring in sardines from wherever you're bringing in sardines, right, they're going to have to rate your insurance risk of the goods being freighted to Nigeria. Now that means that with the way, so that Nigeria and Ghana, they're not paying the same insurance cost or risk. It's different because the risk analysis is different. Now how does somebody doing a risk analysis in Frankfurt or London or New York, with what is going on in this country, how does it do your risk in terms of bringing in goods, in terms of how much I want to borrow money from a bank in London or New York, in terms of even federal government bond pricing, Nigeria's bond pricing of how much the federal government of Nigeria is going to borrow and how much it's going to pay vis-a-vis other countries, even in West Africa. This thing is a carnage on this country because I can't see any normalcy happening anytime soon. You're saying that you're going to have the old notes at the same time with the banknotes. Look at India. It's a vast subcontinent. Over 1 billion people. They changed the currency. Go to your phone and check in 4 days. 4 days, 1 billion people. They knew what they were doing. One advantage India had was that they have the State Bank of India. The State Bank of India has 22,000 branches. That's just one out of many banks, Because they had 22,000 branches, those branches were mainly rural branches, like we once had a rural banking policy. what happened was that they could use 22,000. How many branches do we have? Ikirun doesn't have, Odopolu doesn't have even a single branch because of all this insecurity. Because they had just one bank. India has, like Nigeria, dozens of banks, you know. Because they had a head start, there were already 22,000 branches of the State Bank of India, which is a government-owned bank, you know. That means that you had, in 4 days, you can imagine how many people can bring their cash to 22,000 branches. That is not to mention other banks, you know. Everything was done in 4 days. The government announcement was made. There was all the, you know, on Living Spring and Real FM all advertised and stuff. Currency change started on Monday. It finished on Thursday. By Friday, you didn't see any old notes in circulation. It's not rocket science. They planned for this thing. Can you imagine 4 days in a country with 1 billion people? Nigeria has only 200 million people. Do you know the size of India? It's a subcontinent. Nigeria is not a subcontinent now. But this is what happens when you don't take life seriously. When you put the wrong people in important strategic jobs. When we continue with this as man, no man kind of thing, well, it has a telling effect. Because this currency change is leading this country into a recession. Bismarck was absolutely right that the economy is contracting in the first quarter by 7%. The economic consequences of a contraction of 7%, right, means that you're going to start seeing layoffs. Because if the person who is producing whatever is producing is not selling enough, the stress of meeting a payroll is going to start getting exacting. I mean, you're going to pay salaries now on the 20-something of the month, right? And then he's going to have to start laying people off. At a time when, because of the cost of living crisis, you actually should be increasing salaries. Everybody's taking a hit on their cost of living. It means, for example, that you've got 600,000 people coming out with youth call discharge certificates. And when are you going to get them the jobs? Even ridiculous jobs at minimum wage. So you have a criteria that this ill thought out, kind of reckless attitude to management is going to lead to the country heading into recession by September. That means that if whoever takes over on the 29th of May has to hit the ground running, I hope the person is, because you see, one of the problems with all this abusing each other and stuff is that if it was a serious country, Nigeria is not a serious country to be honest, you would have had by now all the people running for president. They should have at least a tentative finance bill to present by the first week of June. Because it's a crisis. I mean, when Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, they entered Downing Street after 18 years in opposition on a Friday morning. On Monday morning, they presented a path-breaking finance bill. But the country was quite a revolutionary finance bill. I don't see it was costed, you know, right to final figures and stuff. I don't see any of these people taking this. We're in a real crisis because the currency crisis, and you know, the trouble with the currency crisis is that it leads to unintended consequences. For example, if you have a currency crisis in a serious country, right, you begin to send in inspectors to building sites. Because when you have a currency crisis, people begin to cut corners. They start to use substandard materials. The effect of this is that you're going to have building collapses in about 4 months. You don't have to be a prophet or a seer. It happens when there's a currency crisis. The guy is hard pressed. He's owing the bank's money. He's trying to finish the project on time. He has to cut corners, you know. Are we looking at that now? By now, you should have governments even stopping some projects and say, look, we know there's a currency crisis. We know that you're having difficulty getting access to even electronic transfer. So you have to tighten up your building inspection to make sure that people are not cutting corners and using substandard materials. These are the unintended consequences of any currency crisis. When they had the baht currency crisis in Thailand about 18 years ago, the first thing the government did, which was sensible, was that because the currency was in turmoil, any building above 3 floors, they just said, you stop. You know, any building that was more than 3 floors, the government issued a stop and seize order across Thailand, because it was obvious that with the currency crisis, contractors, builders were cutting corners. Now we have this currency crisis. It's a pronounced currency crisis. Our governments in this country, our local government, state, and central level, are they actually tightening up inspection of buildings now? Because the history of in the world in the last 100 years has shown that when there's a currency crisis, there is a problem with building projects. That a currency crisis, none of us is a saint, especially me. I mean, Timmy Talkway is a saint, but you know, but none of us is a saint. The temptation is there for me to start using substandard materials because I'm facing a problem with my banks, with the guy who gave me the job is harassing me. You get what I mean? But have you heard of anywhere in Nigeria now where the government is saying, look, we've got to throw in inspectors to building sites to make sure that people are not cutting corners? The situation, you can't run a country in this kind of amateurish kind of way. It's unfortunate for us. I mean, it's not unfortunate for the people there.
All right. Thank you so much for that extended analysis. But now let's come back to, we've seen the possible impact of this on the elections. We'll still take that as your parting shot. But let's get back to the elections now. There was some issues, you know, violence characterizing. You mentioned one on Saturday in Rivers. There's the ongoing crisis in Imo. A lot of people being killed and injured just for having party affiliations. This is an offshoot of the rhetorics of the principal actors, the political actors themselves. Now, 2 questions now. What do you make of the hate speech and all of that has been happening? The falsehood, like the Femi Fani-Kayode and the issue with the can yesterday, you know, their stamp being forged, somebody writing up a letter to accuse Can. What do you make of all of this? And what issues would you have rather seen being discussed in the campaign?
Well, to have issue-based campaigns, you must first of all have political parties. What we have in Nigeria are special purpose vehicles for the purpose of gaining power and dividing the spoils of office. These are not political parties. Political parties are issue-based. They have a program. I mean, for somebody of my age, you can still recite parallel fashion the programs of the political parties in 1979. And there are 4 cardinal principles, and the debates were vigorous on this. What you have now, they're not political. Look, what you have now is a contest of whose turn it is to eat, and how we're going to divide the spoils of office. These people are not going to promise you anything because they don't have anything other than who's going to get what. And it's going to get worse, and everybody has to be careful in the next, I don't know how many days we've got to go. Because, like, this is winner take all. The sensible thing, if we had a serious class of people, the sensible thing now actually is in a time of real crisis, what we should be thinking about, what the political parties should be tentatively talking about, even in good terms, is that whoever wins this election forms a government of national unity for about 16 months and takes the difficult, brutal decisions that had better be taken. But they're not bothered or interested in that. And it's going to get worse because we have developed a political economy in this country of a large mass of people who have no skills. Where they have wages, they have very low wages. There's massive underemployment and unemployment. And this is the only time for these people to be relevant, to get paid, to act as miscreants and as thugs and never do well and stuff. You should have seen what was happening in Lagos on Saturday. My son said he was so terrified that they were so terrified because they were looking at the stuff there. They slept in the building overnight. You know, they were supposed to close at about 4. You know, they work on Saturdays. You know, and he's 28 years old. You know, and all 6 of them, you know, who work on Saturdays, not everybody, but 6 of them were they slept in the office. You get what I mean? Because the rally finished about 7, but they didn't feel safe enough to start driving home. Then they thought about 9:30 they can now take the lift, go down. But at 9:30 there were still people with machetes and so this is Central Lagos, this is TBS, you know. Luckily they had things like bottled water, don't let me mention brand names in the malt and stuff. That's why they didn't eat anything, you know, since morning, and they were happy to get out in the morning. But see, what I'm saying is that there's nothing you can do about it. You don't have politicians. You have people doing personality merchandising. They have to appeal to ethnicity and religion because they are not selling programs. And they have a high mass of an underclass for whom is a cyclical thing. It's every 4 years. This is Christmas come early. They go pick up some cash. The people causing the mayhem on Saturday in Lagos and in Rivers State and in Imo State, they're not doing it for free. They're not good Samaritans or anything. They are paid to do these things. And the people paying them have to continue paying them until the electoral cycle is over. And we're trapped in this because the whole transition program, the development since 1999, has not been geared towards forming and developing real political parties. Nobody in his right mind can discuss. How can you have a political party in which on the eve of an election, 2 weeks to go, there are still cases, intra-party disputes in court? In how many countries do you hear of political parties in which they still don't know who the candidate for an election is a month, 2 weeks before? Is this happening in Togo, in Ghana, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Kenya, in Republic of South Africa? It goes to show you that the problem we have is much deeper, much structural than we're thinking. Because people want to be polite, they don't want to say certain things, they want to turn a blind eye. But the country is in an intractable, and there are no statesman-like figures who will rise above this and rally the republic and say, look, elections are over. Like I said, it's already bad now. I'm telling you, I don't want you to go and take antidepressants, I'm wondering what's going to happen a day, 2 days, 3, 4 days after the election, in this atmosphere that has been contrived and built up. I'm not sure if I want to hang around some parts of this country 2 days after this election, whichever way the figures go.
Yeah. But before my colleague comes in with the other question, but do you think that the lack of an ideology, a political ideology, is actually a problem with political parties in Nigeria?
It is actually a problem in management of the country itself, because the political party comes into office, ideally, with a program. Over the years, that program has been fine-tuned. It's been costed. Like I said, Blair came into office on a Friday, and they presented a very thorough finance bill on Monday. How many hours is that? Somebody like Awolowo, when he ran in 1979, just to use one example, the program he presented in 1979 was very costed. It wasn't just vacuous statements. It was like, if we stop providing tea in federal government offices across the country, these are the cost savings. He actually mentioned the amount of millions of naira. It was a lot of money in 1979 of the cost savings. We saved this cost from not providing tea, and then we put it into education and stuff. They were costed, which means that a prepared political party that runs on a clear, costed program is better prepared to manage a country. Now you're going to have a party, somebody's going to win this election on the 29th, go to court, sort it out, Supreme Court. In your heart of hearts, what is the level of preparation of any of them? If the person who's going to come out on May 29, is he going to take a business like Apollo? I'm not interested in any banquets, all these kind of parades and stuff. Let's get to work. You get what I mean? And look at what happened in Kenya. Ruto came into office. His principal didn't want him to succeed. He failed. The Supreme Court ruled in his favor. Ruto said, I am going to end subsidies. He said it campaigning, right? He was sworn in by the Chief Justice. Within, facts are sacred, so you can cross-check on your phone. He went into the office of the president. In 16 minutes, he signed the first executive order. He ended subsidies. 16 minutes. It was 16 minutes in between when he entered the office of the president, sat down on a desk. In 16 minutes, he cancelled all subsidies in 16 minutes. That is preparation of work. But then Ruto ran on a program. Ruto had a research department, not people altering vacuous statements, abusing each other's grandparents, talking about somebody planning a coup. They had research departments with costed programs. This is what we're going to do in the first 100 days in office. Look, I give it to you. It was an unpopular decision. But the guy said this country is going to go bankrupt. If in 16 minutes, it's there on your phone, you have data on your phone, it took him 16 minutes to cancel subsidies. It was unpopular. But he said, look, I promised to cancel subsidies. I'm not going to wait for 1 hour to cancel subsidies. And he did. These are admirable things. Okay, the people you see on this campaign trail, do they appear to you as an adult, as an educated person, that they're going to walk into that Aso Rock office on the 29th of May and say, look, this is not time for messing around. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. That within 1 hour, decisive decisions that you know it's not going to happen. Because these guys are not going there in the way that somebody like Ruto did or someone like Modi in India did. These guys are going there to carve up the spoils of office. And the people of this country are better think seriously when they use their PVC because it affects them, their children, those of them who have grandchildren and stuff. This kind of people can't run a country now. They're not serious-minded people. I don't get the impression. Like I said, somebody came into it. This is an African country. How old is Ruto? Ruto is under 60. He came in 16 minutes. He canceled subsidies. That was because he was prepared. In an earlier time, in this same country, the director of research in the political party was one of the most important posts. The late Chinua Achebe I was just coming out of National Youth Service, was the director of research of the PRP. You know who Chinua Achebe was? One of the outstanding people we've ever produced in this country. He was director. It was an important post. Now, since you got acquainted to what we call politics in this country, right? Which political party have you seen that has a high profile Chinua Achebe type person as director of research? Have you even heard of any of these political parties having a director? And yet in this same Nigeria, director of research was a very important, very strategic, prestigious job. When they say somebody is director of research of XYZ political party, you look at him with awe. I said, that's a really important job. And it shows you the lack of preparedness for office. Because what we're talking about, this politics in parentheses, it has really nothing to do with governance. If it did, 133 million people will not be in multidimensional politics. If it did, all the forecasts won't be that the country is heading into a recession. Why are people forecasting a recession? And some people are actually forecasting Naira to dollar rates at the black market rate of about 900 by September. Is it because they want to demarket the country or they're narcissists or nasty people? No. It's because they've done their own scenario planning and seen that the kind of people who are positioning themselves to be sworn in at federal and subnational level on the 29th of May, they're not prepared for office. So if you say that your projection, I hope it's not true, I hope it doesn't come out to be true because I'll pay the price like you. But if you say that your projection is a Naira of about 900 Naira to $1 by September, it's not because you're wishing the country ill. It's because you sat down as a rational person and you say, okay, the person, there are about 4, 5, 6 people who might enter Aso Rock on the 12th. How prepared is this guy to, from the minute he enters that Aso Rock, around about maybe 2 o'clock or something like that, how prepared he is he like Ruto is going to come in there and start making the decisive, look, they're going to be brutal decisions. In your heart of hearts, you know very well that you can't pick one person that you think has that intensity, that drive to make those difficult decisions. So I don't even know, okay, what are we even having an election for? I don't know. I don't see what the election they're doing, what it has on the life of the person saying Alekwodu or counterpart in Ile-Ife, the youth corper who's going to get a discharge certificate. What has this election got to do with that person's life? I'd like to know, because I don't see, these are not serious people now. How can you be saying that somebody, you're talking about a country that is in a real existentialist crisis, and you're talking about somebody planning a coup? Look, if anybody is planning a coup, the government will be responsible not to pick them up. You get what I mean? And for a country to be running at such a level of banality that somebody actually accuses another person. I mean, I expect, for example, that if I accuse somebody of planning a coup in this studio, I expect that by the time I get to the car, the DSS will be waiting for me to pick me up. I mean, it's only rational that the DSS want to know who is planning a coup. How do I know that this person is planning a coup? They want me to tell, I mean, it's a serious country now. That's why I expect the DSS to say, I expect them before I leave this studio, I expect them to be waiting for me by the car. They will boy, come now, what's going on, you know. That this is the banal level of debate. It tells you that we're in a more difficult and pronounced crisis than we thought. If the level of the debate in this country, with how many days to go to an election, which will be a decisive game-changing election once in a generation, then it's very difficult to be optimistic.
All right. In the days past, we've had several Supreme Court judgments. Yeah. But particularly, what do you make of the Supreme Court judgment on Akpabio and Lawan? Well,
I'm sorry to say this, but it shows you the destruction of standards in this country. There's no way any rational person can say that somebody who took part in an election, who did not take part in an election, should become candidate. It doesn't make sense. The Supreme Court is free to issue as many statements as they like. But what they're doing, well, I mean, obviously, we've fallen to another low bar because we've had somebody who is the governor of a state who came forth in an election. So there's nothing you don't expect. What is going on is really disgraceful, actually, because right now, you have a Supreme Court governor who came forth in an election. We now have Supreme Court candidates. A candidate, oh, it's not even a candidate. A person who didn't take part in an election is now a candidate. Now, we might not end up, God knows, with what kind of president the Supreme Court chooses for the country. Because it's now as if the Supreme Court is now choosing a governor. The Supreme Court is now choosing candidates for political parties. Who knows what comes next? Is the Supreme Court, is it the voter that is going to choose the next president of Nigeria to be sworn in on the 29th of May? Or is it the Supreme Court that is going to, I think people had better start thinking sensitive. You see, the disgraceful thing about all this, right, was that, you know, I was in university in the United Kingdom a very long time ago, you know. And one of the things that makes you sad now when you look at the fooling around the Supreme Court is doing, I'm sorry to say they use that kind of language, but, you know, we on the campus, right, you know, in the halls of residence and stuff, you know, people used to talk about their studies, you know, and as a Nigerian, you know, it really blew your mind, you know, your head wide when all these law students, I didn't know what they were talking about. They'll be talking about cases cited from Nigeria. This is a British university that, you know, they were referring to judgments of the Nigerian Supreme Court. And I didn't know what they were talking about. We'd be in the cafeteria eating, and this, you know, I'll be sitting here, these law students know what they're talking about. That, you know, that case from Nigeria and Justice this thing and this thing, that was a path-breaking decision, meaning commercial law, and that case is now been cited in Britain, and where, you know, that there's a very important case study, you know. And I would be, but, you know, I'm a Nigerian, you know. And my head is blown up like this, you know. I was thousands of miles away from home. And these were British students, you know, and they were talking about... No, these guys have been to Nigeria before. They don't know the difference between Ibadan and Port Harcourt, you know. But you felt proud. You know, this is your own country. I'm going to go back to that. Not Japan. I just went there. Parents sent me to go to school and university. And come back to Nigeria and do put on my youth corps uniform and stuff. But it filled you with pride. People don't know what they're talking about. They've never been to Port Harcourt. They don't know where Ibadan is or Ife. They never heard of somebody somewhere called Elisha. But you were Nigerian. You were sitting across the table from them, and they were nattering on naming Nigerian Supreme Court judges, and even debating about themselves, about what this Nigerian judge said. No, okay, the other one said this, but they, you know, they were citing these things in exams, in a British university, in American universities. Is anybody going to cite this kind of thing in an exam? That somebody, I mean, how do you yourself feel? If you were a student of 18, 19 in a university in the United Kingdom or United States or Australia, and you are hearing law students across the table from you in a cafeteria, and they're talking about a Nigerian Supreme Court that they confirmed as a candidate of a political party on the eve of an election, just days or whatever. It's somebody who didn't even take part in a primary. Or people are talking about a Nigerian Supreme Court now makes somebody who came fourth, not second, not third, fourth in an election, they make him the governor of a state. How would you feel? You run out. I mean, you'll be close to tears, because this is your own country, and there's an undertone of racism. That these people are not fit to run their own process, that they should not have been given independence. Yeah, put yourself in the position of an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, thousands of miles away from home. It's not a pleasant feeling. To me, this decision, right, it just doesn't make sense that somebody who didn't take part in an election, you find some technicality and you say that he's not the candidate. He didn't take part in an election. And you're setting precedents. You have to be careful about the precedents you set, because these things might be you're going to be stuck with it, even if you make some twitches in 20 years' time. Obviously, we're not going to have situations in which we're going to have judgments in which the Supreme Court will say he shouldn't be cited as a president. But the most dangerous thing, right? Don't think of today alone. What's going to happen in a few weeks' time? Because whichever way this election turns out, knowing Nigeria, knowing that it's a very fractious election, highly competitive, I can't see anybody getting up to 34% of the vote in this election. Shagari himself only got 32.6%, but it was validated because he got the spread, you know. So what's going to happen when, as is inevitable, people go to court? Who's going to become president of Nigeria? Is it going to be a reflection of the wishes of the people? Or is it going to be a reflection of what the Supreme Court of Nigeria says should be the president? We're getting into very dangerous waters in this country, and I think there should be a pause and people should try and think of the consequences of it. But overall, for me, when you look at the fact that Nigerians were chief justices of so many African countries, if you look at the fact that if you go to Nairobi today, 2 streets are named after outstanding Nigerian lawyers who came to defend. I mean, Kola Balogun is here. But there's Kola Balogun Street in Nairobi. Because he and Chief H.O. Davis, they went from Nigeria to defend the Mau Mau. When the Mau Mau didn't have any lawyers, there were no lawyers in Kenya in 1958. The Mau Mau were facing death penalties. No lawyer was prepared to defend it. They went from Nigeria, Kola Balogun and H.O. Davis. No hotel agreed to put them up. After using their own money to come from Nigeria. No hotel, they had to sleep in the house of sympathizers to the nationalist cause. We had two of the major, not Kwekwe Street, 2 major streets in Nairobi today, out of gratitude, immediately after independence, were named after Kola Balogun and Nigerians. This was when this country had the highest imaginable standards. We now have this racket. How can you say that somebody who did not contest in an election is a candidate? It doesn't make sense.
All right. Well, we'd like to leave it there on the show.
I think I've depressed the two of you now. I'm sure you won't invite me again.
Yes, in the no, we still bring you on to talk about. Well, you made mention of the aftermath of that decision. You know, the Supreme Court issuing warnings to critics. And
Yeah, I mean, have you had that before?
Yes.
In your life, are you an educated? You're a very well-educated person. Have you heard in any country, anywhere in the world, in which the Supreme Court actually issues warnings? Isn't that a contradiction in terms? I mean, say it slowly. Supreme Court of a country issues warning.
Over criticism.
Over criticism. Have you heard of it?
Oh, well.
So what about the people who write legal journals? People who, so a student in a moot debate, a student answering an exam question, he can't criticize the Supreme Court. I can't believe where we have put ourselves in Nigeria.
Well,
I don't believe it.
Well, many things are unbelievable about the state of the nation. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show to speak to us this morning.
Thanks so
Mr.
much.
Kwame Ademole is former chair of the editorial board of the Daily Independent newspapers. Of course, a policy analyst. Very insightful discussion this morning. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
It's kind of you to invite me.
All right, we expect that the whole situation gets better in the country. Well, I'll be coming back to bring you spring trends to let you know who is trending. Quite a number of things are trending, including a general overseer who was arrested by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency for trafficking drugs in kegs of palm wine. You get to see that video and the story later on in the show.
Thanks for joining us today on the program. Have yourself a lovely day. I am Temitope Ajujala Oluola. Good morning.